Let's talk a little bit about the friction that's brewing between the United States and China outside the trade war. It's now set to be showcased tomorrow at a hearing that's focused on holding the World Bank accountable for billions of dollars of loans that have been given to China. Joining us right now with an inside look at this issue is Kyle Bass. He's Hayman Capital Management's Chief Investment Officer. And Kyle, it's good to see you this morning.
Good to see you too, Becky. How are you?
Good. Before we dig into the details of this latest issue that's brewing up here, let's just talk a little bit about what you think is happening with the trade talks. Obviously, yesterday, it rocked the markets a little bit to be thinking that a trade deal wouldn't get done this year or even before the election. This morning, we're back up on reports that a trade deal could be getting a little bit nearer. You have been a critic of China, a very vocal one lately. What do you think is happening behind the scenes?
Well, look, I mean, from the perspective of this skinny trade deal, if it was a skinny trade deal that we got reported to, we got the report, I guess, from you guys that this deal was done. Wasn't that 4 weeks ago? If it's skinny, it's not that hard to put it on paper. The Chinese are going to buy some soybeans and pork, which they desperately need, in exchange for us delaying our tariffs on December 15th. That's actually pretty easy to do. We've been reporting all along that a trade deal is right around the corner. And we've been reporting that since the beginning of 2018. I think the larger question is, why do we even engage with a regime that has a human rights record like China? Why do we even engage with someone that's got 2 to 3 million people in concentration camps? Why do we engage in a regime that treats its people like you're seeing them treat the people of Hong Kong? This is the greater issue, and it's a much larger issue from a cultural perspective. What I hear is going on behind the scenes is China is asking us to roll back our tariffs, and is also existing tariffs, and is also asking for a better deal for Huawei in the U.S. And I can tell you that Huawei and ZTE are the two biggest cancers in the global telecom network, and for the U.S. to even consider rolling back Huawei, I think, would be the biggest mistake we've ever made.
If you listen to the head of the FCC, Ajit Pai, he will say that no matter what happens with trade talks, he is going to continue to insist that U.S. telecom carriers not be using Huawei or ZTE, and in fact, they go back and rip out a lot of the equipment that they've already put in on that front. You think that will hold up, that this administration will stand pat if there's a trade deal to be had?
I do. And again, what you speak of is the government, U.S. government not using Huawei and ZTE components. The private sector.
They're pushing it to the private sector, too. Ajit Pai now wants the rural telecom companies that have already used it to go back in and rip it out, and is looking for ways to help pay to do that.
That's right. I think sometime in the next 6 months, you're going to see some much larger news break on one of those telecom companies that I think is going to get everyone's attention. But if you just look at how those companies operate around the globe, and you read local court cases as how much bribery and coercion, and that, like, literally the culture of those companies is so broken, and it's so completely different than the way we do business here, that's why I think we finally have this clash of cultures that we're facing today.
Kyle, let's talk about the most recent news, the news you're on to talk about. And this is a bill that's being introduced to go after loans that the World Bank has made to China. Part of this entire trade war is the perception that China's been getting an unfair deal, even as its economy has grown to be the second largest economy in the world, that they still continue to be treated as a developing economy. Explain a little bit about what's happening with this latest bill.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's something really interesting happening behind the scenes. The first question is, why on earth is the World Bank lending China $3 or $4 billion a year? Mm-hmm. You have the IDA, the International Development Authority, you have the IDRC, all lending money to China, $3 to $4 billion a year. We're lending money to the country that's the second largest in the world, that's putting up quantum-based satellites, that's the largest consumer of Patek Philippe watches, Rolls-Royce, Chateau Lafite Rothschild, and the U.S. consumer, the United States taxpayer, is the guarantor of World Bank loans. That's how the World Bank has a AAA rating because of you and I, Becky. Mm. And that money is going to China. And the test that they have that's a quantitative test is when your gross national income goes from $2,500 to $6,900. In there, you're eligible for the IDRC loans. And once your national income per capita gets above $6,900, you're supposed to graduate. Well, China's national income, GNI per capita, exceeded $6,900 at the end of 2015. almost 5 years ago. Since then, they've borrowed $8 billion from the IDRC, and they haven't graduated yet because China has infiltrated the World Bank. They created positions within the World Bank, the managing director, the head of human relations. Believe it or not, the head of ethics at the World Bank is a member of the Chinese Communist Party. And so what's going on today, Becky, what's fascinating is since Congressman Gonzalez set this hearing on Thursday at 10 a.m. to discuss China's graduating in the World Bank and their basically their ability to stop borrowing from the IDRC because their GNI per capita is now 50% greater than the threshold.
9,470.
Yeah, it's actually, that's how they calculate it at World Bank because the China's helping calculate it. When you look at the way the rest of economists around the world calculate it, it's well north of 10,000 in GNI per capita. That's almost 50% greater than the threshold. And what China's doing on Thursday is the World Bank is actually having a meeting that the funny thing is they're having a meeting to discuss the country partnership framework, the CPF. So despite graduation, there's a 200-page document that has yet to be posted to their website that says the World Bank's going to lend to China $1.5 billion a year until the end of time. They're going to force the IFC to lend to Chinese corporations $1 billion a year until the end of time. This 200-page document hasn't been posted to the World Bank website. The World Bank website doesn't even have the meeting on Thursday. And guess what? The meeting on Thursday for the World Bank board to discuss the Chinese country partnership framework happens to be coincidentally at 10 a.m. at the exact same time that Congressman Gonzalez's hearing begins. It's not coincidental.
Kyle, can I just interject? I'm curious, how do these views that you have translate into your own investments? You have the well-known short yuan trade from 15, 16, 17. Are you still short the yuan? Are you short individual companies or long individual companies as a result of these views?
No, I'm not. And I'm not short any companies in China. I don't have any positions in China. You know, I've spent 10 years of my life studying their banking system, their financial system, and now how they operate. I'm looking at China's grand strategy, and I've spent a lot of my own capital and time dealing with some of the most ridiculous issues that are in the marketplace. It is insane that U.S. taxpayers are backing the World Bank to lend money to a country, again, that's as advanced as China. The World Bank is supposed to be lending to poor nations that have aggrieved populations, that have vulnerable populations, and we're trying to help lift people up out of poverty. China's got more millionaires around the world than almost anyone, and they are a rabid consumer of many of the world's top brands. And as we all know, the largest strategic military competitor in the world that the U.S. has. And for some reason, we keep giving them billions of dollars. It's crazy.
Kyle, I want to thank you for your time today. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Don't be a stranger, Kyle. Hope to see you again soon.
You take care, Joe.